1410 News.
Turning our attention to North Korea, the real hot spot in the globe these days. American officials in Washington now telling numerous media outlets that North Korea has in fact developed a nuclear weapon that is capable of being placed on and used on an intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach the United States. A very worrying development, an inevitable one perhaps. Joining us right now to talk about it is Elliot Tepper of the Carleton University Political Science Department. Elliot, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Rick.
This was really just a matter of time, wasn't it? I mean, they showed no intent whatsoever of slowing down in their nuclear program. This seemed to be their only obstacle. That was somehow miniaturizing a nuclear warhead capable of putting it on a missile.
Well, it also has to survive reentry. So there's another phase to go. Yes, it's one of those things that we knew was coming. I've been one of those who've been arguing for years that saying that, look, this test failed or that one didn't succeed or they're probably lying overlooks the fact that they'll just keep right on trying. And every time they try, they get a little better. And so there was a trajectory there. Lately, Kim Jong-un has really accelerated the whole pace of the program for developing a capable weapon and a missile capable of carrying that weapon, and now a miniaturization that would allow it to really deliver far afield a nuclear weapon. So what's startling about this, Rick, is that we knew it might be coming. It was going to come sometime. This may not actually be it either, but it will come. Is this a game changer is the question.
Well, it certainly will be once they are able to accomplish this. Not necessarily because they're objective. I don't think anybody would suggest their ambition is to, as soon as they develop this capability, to fire it at the United States. I don't think they're looking for that kind of confrontation, even though they rattle the sabers every day. That seems in a manner that seems to suggest that. I think what they want to do is they want to have a seat at the biggest table of all, the most important table of all, and that is the nuclear club in the world. And it wants to use that to try and assure its own security.
Yes, this is a nuclear deterrent in their own view, but at the same time, a nuclear deterrent, from their view, looks suspiciously like a weapon of mass destruction to everybody else, so that we can't comfortably say, well, go ahead and let them do it and sit and stew, and we'll talk to them at some time down the road. If you are a close neighbor, or in this case, the United States saying that we do not have a threat at the minute from North Korea, from that source, but we are going to, the President of the United States has said, this is not going to happen under my watch. The homeland will not come under threat. So, the military doesn't look at capabilities, at intentions, it looks at capabilities. And the capabilities, in the case of North Korea, perhaps have just ratcheted up.
I want to ask you about China. Donald Trump, his administration has tried to apply all kinds of pressure on China in a belief that China somehow holds sway over North Korea. And there's no doubt through trade and other means it does to a greater degree than, I guess, any other country in the world today. China today saying it will enforce UN curbs on North Korea. Trump is heralding this as a major breakthrough. Is it?
Well, what's interesting is they're saying not only will we support at the United Nations sanctions, but we're actually going to follow through on our word. And the United States has said we're going to watch China to see that they do follow through. There clearly has been a change of tone by the Chinese, and there will be some change of behavior by the Chinese. Apparently, they are concerned. However, are they going to fundamentally change their reckoning of their national interest? And that's a far more doubtful proposition. Their national interest until now has been, we'll put up with a lot. In fact, we'll put up with a great deal from North Korea in order to prevent the unification of Korea under South Korean and therefore American and Western coalition, us included, auspices, and bring America right up to the border of China. And that kind of buffer state mentality has so far allowed them to support North Korea no matter what it's done. What has changed is the tone and the apparent willingness to take steps that might hurt. But Rick, will they ever do enough to see to it that there might in fact be a regime change to their advantage and everyone else's advantage? Will they do enough, for example, cutting off oil, that could bring down the regime?
Well, maybe the answer to that question is how much is the Trump administration prepared to do to get China's full cooperation? Do they not hold a bit of a card here, China, in being able to say, in return for this, we want a fully denuclearized area in the Koreas, and that would mean withdrawing some military presence there.
Yes. So far, that's not actually been on the table. That is, China's long-term goal, which has been accelerated in recent times, is to become the dominant power in the region, and that means pushing out all others, starting with America, and so that all the other states have to deal only with China, not necessarily as an occupier, but the big power dealing with smaller powers. So far, the deal on the table is not, if the U.S. pulls out of the region entirely, then China will deal with North Korea. But clearly that is a looming possibility. Right now, what's on the table by China is a double suspension. That is, North Korea will suspend its ICBM test. They'll do testing suspension, and the United States will do the suspension of the joint military exercises that they do quite regularly with South Korea and now also with Japan. That's not been accepted by North Korea.
We've read, I think you've probably read more than most, some pretty dark scenarios of what the military option might look like, potentially costing millions of lives in the United States. Do you think that it's realistic at all that the United States could develop a military response to this growing crisis without that kind of horrific doomsday outcome?
The possibility of of war, I won't say nuclear war immediately, the possibility of war has gone up. I don't think there's any doubt about that. America now has an administration that says they're not going to accept a threat to the homeland, and a president who perhaps is even more unpredictable than the president of North Korea. So would he be seeking a military option and perhaps looking strong at home to the possible cost of a major war, which would be horrific, as his own Secretary of Defense has said, horrific in terms of the casualties in South Korea and Japan potentially, and his response is better that they die over there than over here.
Yeah, pretty sobering analysis.
I'm sorry to be so sobering, but this is to me a very perilous time. We have survived many perilous times. We should not jump to the conclusion that there's going to be an action taken deliberately that will lead to a massive war. But there's always the possibility of miscalculation, one side not really understanding what the other side might do, and there's more than two sides here because China and Russia are all involved. But there's also a chance of a mistake.
Yeah.
So that if one of these missiles comes down in the wrong place, or if there's a nervous soldier that fires at the wrong time, so both miscalculation and mistakes, I think, are an issue. I am concerned about the raising of the nuclear temperature. The possibility of nuclear war has ratcheted up during our glorious summer here. Remember, China and India are also backing into a confrontation neither one wants in Bhutan, and there's always the possibility of India and Pakistan backing into something as well, so particularly with some Chinese assistance.
Right. Well, we'll leave that for another day. We've got to go. But I got to tell you, I'm old enough, I suspect you are, that this conjures up memories of the old Cuban Missile Crisis in terms of just the hair trigger that everything seems to be hinging on right now.
We're not at the Cuban Missile Crisis, but we're closer than we were until today's announcement came out.
Okay, well, that's really good perspective, I think. For those of us